This week in the conversation, I have the privilege to let you know that prolific writer from Chicago, Alice Liddell, is back. We're going to be talking about her fantastic historical novel titled Geisha Hands. And also, we will be talking about the publishing industry. But before we get into the video, I just want to remind everyone that it's important to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you do, don't forget to click the notification bell so that way every time a video is posted, it will go directly into your portable. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardain Isma. I'm so delighted to have once again my old friend, prolific writer, Alice Liddell, in the conversation. To begin with, Alice, welcome again to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me here. You are wonderful, and I am so excited to be a part of this channel again. You do great work, and I'm just so honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
All right. So there's no need to ask you for who you are. If anybody wants to know, they can also check out the other interviews that we have. You know, it's on the channel, it's on your website too.
Yep.
So, Alice, I read your novel, historical novel, Geisha Hands. And I have to say, it's not because this is something that I don't always say to writers, especially the ones I have in the conversation, but I have to say this, it's a great work of fiction.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the meticulousness cannot be overlooked. To be honest with you, I knew nothing about geisha before I started reading the novel. So the first thing I did, I did a little bit of research on that, just to get myself more educated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my first question on geisha, I know it's a historical novel, but you choose a specific time period for it.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you choose this specific time period for the novel?
So I chose the Meiji period, which is basically like the World War II period. And
Right.
specifically, the novel takes place before World War II happens. And the reason why I chose that is the culture in Japan was still very, very traditional. It didn't have a lot of outside influence, especially due to their isolation laws that they had, where they actually had very strict laws where they didn't trade with very many countries because they wanted to really preserve their traditions and their culture. They didn't want a lot of outside influence, but it was still modern enough that I felt that my readers would be able to still connect with it. Because in the past, when I have talked with people about much later, earlier periods in Japanese history, especially during the feudal era, most people, it's just very hard for them to connect with that, because a big part of the reason why I wrote Geisha Hands was I wanted it to be kind of this bridge for this just enormous gap between Eastern and Western culture. I just wanted to kind of bring more understanding, to the Japanese culture, for Western readers, because so many people I talk to, they oftentimes have a very hard time visualizing and connecting with a lot of that culture and history, because it's just so incredibly different from what, they understand and what they're used to.
Uh-huh. Up until 1945, Japan was, we must say, an imperial power in Asia. And lots of countries surrounding Japan have suffered also in the Japanese occupation, mainly China and the
Yes.
Koreas more specifically.
Yes.
In your novel, I was expecting something like this, but I know the context which you write the novel. And the two characters, especially the protagonist, which is Yuki.
Yes.
And the sister Katsu.
Yes.
And really, they impressed me tremendously. It's not really they, but the way you paint the story. Now, you said something, and I want to read it just to get it right. You say, I feel the best way to experience culture is to immerse yourself into it. And there are also things best explained in the native language. And you know what? Your novel, as a historical novel, is not the only novel that one can find a glossary, at the back of it where, foreign words being used just to use the context in which it used in the text itself. But you add an element that I've never seen before, which is you're wanting a footnote at the bottom of every page. So usually you find that, and and not literary works, but specifically an academic work. I teach research. I know exactly what you and I are talking about. But why did you? Is that because the Japanese language itself is not something you wanted to make it easier for the reader to get connected to the story? So you don't have to go back and forth, to the back of the page, and can get you pinned down in the story too. Was that the reason
Yes.
why?
Yeah, so that's why I had both the footnotes and the glossary at the end. I wanted to have the footnotes be a quick reference for the reader so that they don't have to break out of the story in order to be like, oh, what is this word? Or, oh, what are they saying? They can just look it down at the bottom of the page and be like, oh, right, okay, and go back into the story. But I also have it where a lot of those footnotes, if you go to the back of the glossary, there's also a lot more cultural information there explaining some of the things that I put the footnotes on as well. So it's kind of like this idea of you can learn as much or as little as you like while reading this story. So if you just want to do the quick reference to the footnotes just to read the story, that's great. If you're more interested, that you're like, wow, I really want to learn more about this musical instrument or this ceremony they're doing, you can flip back to the glossary, and I have more information on a lot of those entries that people can really go down that rabbit hole of knowledge and information as it suits them. It was I kind of wanted to create a hybrid sort of like story and textbook. I wanted to make learning fun
I can
was
see
the
that.
goal.
I could see that. And you follow the protagonist from point A to point B and struggling to become a full geisha,
Yes.
and also being very successful at it. Now, I have a question for you. Is that a story, between the line? I mean, do you want to teach through this story a perseverance and hope and determination?
Absolutely. So, a big motivator for why I created Yuki the way that I created her is that in a lot of these types of stories where a character is, whether it's coming of age or they're trying to reach a goal or, some sort of life transition in
Right,
the story,
right.
so I've become so frustrated with so many stories, have them, cross that threshold of whatever that life transition is, and they're always the best and the brightest and the most famous and the most talented and
Right.
whatever, and I'm like, that's so not realistic, especially because today we're living in this world of everything is over the top, everything has to be perfect, everything is airbrushed and photoshopped and edited, and I just wanted to create a character that was realistic. I wanted her to have goals, but I also wanted her to have disappointments, and I wanted her to be able to overcome those disappointments and to honestly be okay with being average,
Exactly.
because that's a thing that so many people are struggling with in today's society, is how do I be okay with where I am in life and not be the richest, the most famous, the most talented, whatever, because it's such a small percentage, not everyone can be that, and it's okay to not be that, and that was really what I wanted to promote with her character.
There's something that you say that the very nature of a piece of fiction is flawed. Is that a disclaimer that before you begin to read the story? Uh,
A bit. So, in part, I put that disclaimer because I do recognize that I am a white American. I am not a Japanese American. I am not a Japanese, homeland person. So, of course, there are going to be flaws in the story. There are going to be flaws in, the research and what I present because I can never, 100% purely, tell this story the way that a Japanese person would be able to. So it's kind of just that, take it with a grain of salt that I'm doing my best in the capacity that I have and that I recognize those flaws.
Uh-huh. Yep. Okay. For me, like I said, what impresses me the most is the meticulousness. I mean, yeah, this brings my next question. How did you come to get so fascinated with the geisha culture or Japanese culture in general? Was that when you were young or something? Younger?
Yeah, as a young child, I first got interested in Japanese culture actually through anime, which is a very common thing. A lot of Americans,
Mhm.
first get their first taste of Japanese culture through anime and manga.
Right.
And as I, watched those TV shows and read those books, I became very fascinated with, what is it like? To live in Japan? What is the history of this place? So from there, as a child, I took that as a jumping off point to start actually learning more about Japan and the culture and the history on my own, going and reading textbooks and other historical fiction pieces. And I just, I don't know. I've just always had a very deep fascination with it. And I have that with other cultures as well. But Japan just has a very special place in my heart. And I own a lot of Japanese fiction books. I own several textbooks, and I actually had the very special honor of being able to spend 14 days in Japan as an adult, and I experienced an overwhelming amount of just authenticity in that, I made sure that I stayed like in the local hotels. I did, I wanted to be as, immersed in it as possible. I went to the local shops, I went to the local restaurants, off the beaten path sort of thing. And it was just so beautiful and they were so welcoming. And yeah, it's just always been this very deep fascination. And I've always just endlessly wanted to know more. And with Geisha, I've even before the book and the movie Memoirs of a Geisha came out, I
Right.
had learned about geisha prior to that. And I always just thought they were so beautiful. And I just loved this idea that they're living art. That they're there to, not just entertain you, but, they're also technically diplomats. They would be present at important meetings and be kind of this buffer, and they were extremely educated and extremely talented. And I just loved every bit of that because I myself, see myself kind of as that, is that I love to dress myself as a work of art. I love to be as educated as possible. I love to grow my talents. And so I just
Mhm.
really identified with that. And that's a lot of where that fascination came from.
Okay. Now, quick question.
Yes.
Alice, how long did it take you to write this story?
Oh my goodness. It took 5 years from beginning to end.
Wow. I see you use illustrations. Was that the way
Yes.
you wanted to make it easier for the reader? For me, take a look.
Yes. I've always, heard from people that what good is a book with no pictures in it, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. And what better way to give someone a visual on what something looks like than a picture? So I drew all of them.
But you're very lucky. I remember in our last during our last conversation, you mentioned that you work with an artist
Oh no,
who.
I am the artist.
Oh, you
I
are
drew
the
all
artist.
of them.
You drew all of those.
I did, yes. That's why it took 5 years. It took 3 years to write the book, and it took 2 years to draw everything.
Alice, actually, you deserve the big plaque, the golden one. That's what you have. You could do this all this stuff. And I remember you said that, well, with a manuscript like this, it would be very difficult for a publisher to take it, to purchase it from you,
Yes.
because it would be very expensive to publish.
Yes.
So this is a transition from Geisha to the publishing world, because I know you're very experienced in that.
Yes.
There is something that is very popular these days. It's called hybrid publishing. Could you please tell us a little bit about, educate the audience? Because I know it's a contract between a writer and a publishing house, but it's been shared. I mean, the writer brings in a portion of the publishing costs, but a lot of people have some reservation about that. So can you explain a little bit, Alice? Because I know you can educate the audience about that.
So I have seen a bit about hybrid publishing, and I do find it a little bit of a sticky, area, because it can be very hard for people to be able to tell the difference between a true legitimate publisher and a vanity publisher, which is where these publishing companies essentially ask you to pay them to publish your book. And with that, they don't really care about the quality of your book. They just want your money, and then they'll just make it into a book, and they're not going to actually market it. They just put it on their website with other people that have done the same thing. And with hybrid publishing, it's kind of become this little bridge between self-publishing and traditional publishing, because a lot of publishers are realizing that with the advent of social media and all these different platforms that are enabling people to be able to have resources that they've never had before in order to publish on their own, such as programs that do all the layout for you, all sorts of stuff that the average person probably would, not be an expert in knowing how to do that. And so in order to kind of win back a lot of these potential authors, it's become kind of this thing where they're becoming more flexible. Well, I mean, some publishers, not all of them, but some publishers are becoming more flexible in what they're allowing. And so in exchange, they kind of want the author to also invest in their novel. So it's kind of this meet me halfway sort of thing. They're like, okay, we'll give you more creative freedom with your story that you want, but at the same time, you're going to kind of have to meet us halfway, and you're going to have to invest in this too. And how that's different is that they're actually going to, properly publish your book, where they're actually going to properly hire an editor, give you a team. They're going to actually market your book, get it out there, in online bookstores and in brick and mortar bookstores. They're going to do the whole 9 yards, whereas a vanity publishing press doesn't do that. They're just like, okay, it's a book now, congrats, the end.
There's some companies out there like Ingram or Baker and Taylor. Amazon has also Create Space, I believe, or KDP.
Yeah, Create Space.
Yeah. These are the platforms that you can use. But can someone, if you own your publishing company, can you use those platforms to publish your book?
Absolutely.
Under the title of your company?
100%. So we actually, at Cloud Orchid Publishing, we use Create Space on Amazon in order to publish our books. And we made that choice because Amazon already has the built-in selling platform and audience. It just was a really good fit for us. Whereas I have other author friends who have also created their own publishing companies, and some of them prefer to use Ingram Sparks. And they have their own reasons for wanting to use Ingram rather than Amazon. And, all these different platforms come with their own pros and cons. And I always suggest, do your research before selecting which one you want to use, and see which one is more geared toward the goals that you have and also the way that you work for creating your books.
Okay, so now, Alice, is there truly a big difference between Create Space and Ingram?
Absolutely. So one of the big reasons why we chose not to go with Ingram is because you have to pay to make any changes to your books. If if you find any typos in your book, or if you want to make a new edition or anything like that, you have to pay them to basically reprint, the series, or, the full run, all that sort of stuff. And that can be costly depending on the changes that you need to make. Whereas with CreateSpace, you can change it as many times as you want. I mean, you could change it like 100 times in a week, and it doesn't matter, and it doesn't cost anything.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And Alice, that's the reason why I love to have you on the conversation. Yes, because Alice is my great teaching tool.
I love to help.
But so now, Alice, because I know just for the purpose of time, you working the last time we talked, working on another historical novel during the French Revolution, right? So where are we now in this now? Because I'm done with Geisha now. I'm just waiting for this one.
So to begin with, it does have a historical fiction slant. However, I am marketing it as a dark fantasy because the premise of the book is vampires.
Okay.
So basically, the idea of it is it takes place in 19th century France,
Right.
and it has parallels to the French Revolution in that it takes the idea very literally that the French nobles are literally sucking the life out of the common people because they're vampires. And no spoilers, of course, because oh my goodness, like that ending, I was just like, I am so proud of that. Ooh, but there's definitely some very historical parts of the novel that go along with how the French Revolution came to be and all that. So that stuff is in there, and it's a really fun novel. It's high energy, it's exciting, the characters are sassy and fun. It's just a really good time. But at the same time, because I'm me and I'm a giant historical dork, there is a ton of detail in there that I did let a little things get a little loosey-goosey for the fantasy element, but there is a lot of cultural accuracy in just kind of the structure of the story and the setting.
Just for the mere fact that you just mentioned, the nobility is sucking the peasants dry. I know what you're talking about. Just so for those of you who just didn't know, Alice Liddell also speaks French, so it makes it easier to write a novel. Mm-hmm. So Alice, my last question, I really don't want to end the conversation, but so purchase of time. My last question, Alice. Now, I know you're a multi-genre author. I know you're currently working on this important historical novel. Is there any other work of fiction that you're working on, or any other major project?
Absolutely, because that's just how I operate. Is once I finish the project, it's time to work on the next one. And I am very pleased to say that the French novel, which is titled Succumb to Darkness, is currently in the hands of the publisher, and we are waiting on that one last definitive question of it's yes right or no. It's literally going to be either thanks but no thanks, or here's a book contract. We've gotten to that point, so super nervous and excited. But I have taken the time, while I'm waiting for that response. I am currently working on my 7th novel, which is going to be another romance novel titled Be Mine. And a big part of that, as we discussed previously, is getting to that magic number 10. I need to have
number 10.
Yep. Got to keep working on that. So I have it where it's like, write, a novel, write a romance novel, write a novel, write a romance novel.
So that one you just mentioned is going to make it what, the 7th one or the
4th romance novel? Yeah. And because I'm crazy, I'm also at the same time working on a very special project, which is I actually began writing this series when I was only 13 years old. And it's a complete fantasy young adult series. It is 13 books, and all 13 books
13 books?
are, yes. And all 13 books are complete, but the manuscripts are very old from me writing them over the years. So I
Right.
kind of have to start over and rewrite them all, as well as, because I'm extra crazy, I'm also doing full color illustrations for all of them.
Remember what the doctors say now. You gotta slow down a bit, Alice.
So I've got all of that going on, along with, you know, all my regularly scheduled work and life activities. So it's a lot, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Okay. So with that, my old friend, I'm just gonna say it's been more than just a pleasure to have you once more in the conversation.
Thank you. It's been so wonderful. I appreciate you.